Dad, you've saved enough. Hand it over. Daniel's hand slammed against the table, then his shove sent me sprawling back into the chair. The jolt rattled through me, sharp and humiliating. My dog tags, the ones I hadn't taken off since my service days, clinked against my chest as I steadied myself. That faint metallic sound lingered in my ears, a reminder of the discipline that had once kept me alive in deserts and jungles far away. Discipline, I realized, would have to save me again tonight, but not from enemy fire, from my own blood. The kitchen smelled of stale coffee. The mug I had been sipping from was still half full, cooling fast on the table. Overhead, the neon bulb buzzed with a tired hum, throwing a weak yellow light across Daniel's sharp face and Alyssa's perfectly arched brows. Florida nights in August carry their own heaviness, thick heat pressing in, dampness on the walls. But the weight in the room had nothing to do with the weather.
Daniel shoved a folder across the table.
497,000. That's what this house costs. Just co-sign, Dad. Use that credit score you've been polishing like some trophy. It's our dream. The papers slid toward me. I didn't even reach for them. I knew the weight of such documents, heavier than any rifle I ever carried. I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised on hard work and tight budgets, and I said softly, "No." Alyssa's scoff cut through the air. "He's 62, Daniel. He'll never spend it all, and we need this now. Family helps family. That's what you told me." She leaned back, scrolling her phone as if my life savings were a casual number on a screen. Daniel's voice rose. "We've sacrificed enough. It's time you did your part for us." My ribs tightened. I already did my part. Every meal you ate here, every hour I worked, that was my part. The silence after my refusal felt like the second before an explosion. Then it erupted.
Daniel lunged, shoving the chair against my chest.
Alyssa's hand pressed against my shoulder with surprising force, pushing me sideways. My ribs struck the table's edge, a searing bolt of pain spreading across my side. "Stop this!" I tried to push back, but the breath caught in my throat. I had fought men larger than Daniel in training, men desperate on foreign streets, but never had I felt a betrayal strike so deep. My own son's palm against my chest, his wife's nails biting into my arm. It stole more from me than strength. It stole the bond I thought could never break. To the papers fluttered tuned close, her perfume sharp, almost sweet. "If you don't pay, next time, worse." Her whispers slid into my ear, colder than any winter I had ever known. The room tilted. My head spun, the neon light blurring into a haze. Pain radiated from my side with each shallow breath. My hand reached instinctively for the table's edge, but it was too late. The world slipped out from under me. Darkness closed in, not with the chaos of battle, but with the silence of abandonment. No medic rushing in, no comrade covering my flank. Only the echo of my dog tag striking my chest as I collapsed, and the fading outline of Daniel's face, unrecognizable, twisted in anger. I thought I heard the scrape of their footsteps leaving, the slam of the front door, or maybe it was only in my head. Time unraveled into something slow, syrupy. My body ached, but worse was the hollow throb in my chest. Not from the shove, but from the truth. My son saw me not as a father, but as a bank account with bones. When the darkness lifted, it wasn't relief that greeted me, it was restraint. I opened my eyes in the hospital, a fluorescent glare stabbing into them. My wrist was bound by a patient's strap, tethered to the bed rail. The smell of disinfectant, the steady beep of the heart monitor. "Mr. Coleman, you have 2 fractured ribs." The doctor's voice was even, professional, but the words landed like another blow across my chest. I lay still beneath the hospital's fluorescent lights, white glare reflecting off every sterile surface. My body felt fragile in a way I had never allowed myself to admit before. A Marine doesn't like to be reminded of weakness. But tonight, weakness had a name. It was Daniel, it was Alyssa. The doctor adjusted the chart at the foot of my bed. "You were lucky it wasn't worse. 2 ribs cracked, bruising across the torso. You'll need to rest. And Mr. Coleman?" He paused, meeting my eyes over his glasses. If this ever happens again, if you're assaulted, you need to report it to the police, especially if it's family. Abuse doesn't get better by itself. Kyoed inside me longer than the beep of the monitor. Report to the police. A father calling the cops on his son. The thought twisted in my chest, but the advice planted itself in the soil of my mind like a seed. Ty. When the doctor left, the room fell silent except for the machine's steady rhythm. A reminder I was alive, though bruised. My hand drifted to my ribs, the pain sharp even under the bandage. I closed my eyes for a moment, but the silence didn't last. My phone buzzed on the metal tray beside me. The vibration was harsh in the quiet room. I fumbled it up to my ear. Daniel's voice poured through, jagged and cold. "Pay or next time worse." The line went dead. No apology, no hesitation, just the blunt edge of a threat. I stared at the black screen until it lit up again, this time a voicemail notification. I pressed play. Alyssa's voice, sugar poured over poison. "Don't be selfish, Dad. We're family. You know what this house means to us." Her tone shifted, soft and pitiful. "Daniel's upset, but it's because he loves me, loves our future. Please, don't ruin this." Her words clawed at me in a different way. She didn't shout, she didn't shove. She simply wrapped manipulation in silk and handed it to me like a gift. But it was another form of violence, one that left no bruises to show the nurses. My ribs burned with each breath, not only from the injury, but from the weight of betrayal pressing down harder than any fist. I thought of Daniel at 10, sitting cross-legged on the floor, begging me to teach him how to tie a proper knot. His small fingers clumsy with the cord until finally, after dozens of tries, he got it right. The pride in his eyes then had been real. Where had that boy gone? Calming, another voicemail appeared almost immediately. Alyssa again. This time her voice cracked with manufactured tears. "Don't make us beg. We'll do anything, just help us. It's all we're asking." My jaw tightened, my thumb hovered over delete, but instead I opened the recorder app. For the first time, I pressed record. The screen glowed red as the next voicemail played. Her words, dripping false affection, now became evidence. I bit down on my lip until I tasted copper. If they wanted to corner me with lies, then every word they spoke would become my weapon. My memory had always been sharp, but paper and digital files, those carried weight in courtrooms. Tonight, a line had been crossed. I was no longer only the father under assault. I was a witness, building a record. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't answer. I set it down, the red light still blinking. The heart monitor kept its steady pace, indifferent to the decision I had just made. From this night on, nothing they said would vanish into thin air. I turned my head slightly, ribs screaming in protest. On the cabinet above the bed, someone had hung my dog tags. They swung gently from the hook, catching the light. Symbols of service, of duty, of battles survived. He stared at the dog tags hanging from the hospital cabinet. "Richard, if you don't help Daniel, we'll sue you too." Ethan's voice was sharp, almost triumphant, as if he'd been waiting years for the chance to say it. I had been home for less than 24 hours. My ribs were still bound in fresh bandages, every breath catching like a knife between my lungs. The salty air from the Jacksonville coast drifted into my backyard, heavy with late summer heat. Cicadas screamed from the trees, their endless buzzing underscoring the hostility across the patio table. Undermined and Marjorie sat opposite me, leaning forward as if they owned the place. We had grown up together, shared backyard barbecues, funerals, 4th of July fireworks, blood, or so I had once thought. But tonight their eyes held no kinship, only calculation. "You've got retirement accounts, investments. Everyone knows you're sitting on it," Marjorie said, her lipstick too bright against the sneer curling her lips. "Why let it rot when family needs it?" The phrase made my stomach churn. Family. A word used like a crowbar, prying open doors they had no right to touch. I had just survived being shoved to the floor by my own son, and now cousins, people I once trusted to watch my back at reunions, stood in the same place as enemies. "I won't fund Daniel's bad choices, and I certainly won't fund yours," I answered, my voice steady despite the ache gnawing at my ribs. Ethan smirked, pulling a folded sheet from his pocket. He slapped it onto the table, the paper fluttering in the coastal breeze. This is a demand. You either contribute a fair share or you'll be dragged into court with us. Don't think we won't. Blackjack at the page but didn't touch it. The words were familiar, legal jargon dressed up like authority. No lawyer's letterhead, no signatures, just a bluff. Still, it carried the stink of something I would need to keep. You'd sue me because I won't bankroll Daniel's fantasies, I asked. Marjorie crossed her arms. Don't play dumb.
Everyone knows you've got more than enough. You're just being selfish.
Your own son, Richard, he deserves that money. And if you won't help him, you'd better help us. Family helps family. The repetition of that line, family helps family, echoed like a broken record from every mouth that demanded my savings. My jaw tightened. The bandages beneath my shirt itched with sweat. I bled for this country, I said quietly. I patched pipes for 30 years to build what little I have. If you think I'll hand it over because you slapped the word family on it, you're mistaken. Ethan rose from his chair, leaning across the table. His finger jabbed into my chest, right above the tender ribs that still burned from Daniel's shove. Pain flared, but I didn't flinch. We've already spoken with a lawyer, Ethan hissed. Don't make us drag your name through court. Don't embarrass yourself in front of the community. Settle this quietly. Sign what Daniel wants, or we'll make you regret it. Outer. Or maybe my ears just caught the fury boiling in my blood. For years, I had been the dependable cousin, the one who showed up to help patch a roof, fix a leaky sink, drive someone home after too many drinks. Now those same people stood in front of me with threats, their loyalty traded for imagined payouts. I leaned back slowly, disguising the sharp intake of breath as my ribs protested. My hand slipped into the pocket of my jacket where my phone rested, screen dark. Earlier that morning, I had installed a simple recording app, the kind the doctor's warning had nudged me toward. If words were weapons now, then I would arm myself with theirs. As Ethan's finger pressed harder, Marjorie leaned in too, her perfume cloying, her voice dripping with disdain. Sign, Richard, or the whole family will know you abandoned your blood. Tap the phone through the fabric. The screen buzzed faintly in acknowledgement, the red dot glowing unseen. Their voices, sharp, greedy, accusing, were no longer just insults in the humid air, they were evidence. Richard recorded everything on the phone, hidden in his pocket. The neighbor leaned close and whispered, "Poor Daniel, I heard his father is so selfish." Into my ear like a splinter, small but sharp enough to fester. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, grocery bag in one hand, the humid Florida air pressing heavy on my shoulders. The woman's pitying eyes were fixed not on me, but on the picture she had already formed, an old man clutching his money while his son suffered. That image would spread faster than truth ever could. Later that morning, I walked into Murphy's Diner, the place I had been coming to for 20 years. The bell over the door jingled the same as always. The booth still smelled faintly of bacon grease and coffee, but the warmth was gone. Where once I was greeted by nods and easy smiles, heads now bent lower into cups, conversations shrank to whispers. Sarah, the waitress who had known my order by heart for a decade, approached without meeting my eyes. She set the mug down harder than she needed to, the dark liquid sloshing over the rim. Not a word. No, "Good morning, Richard." No gentle joke about the heat, just the silence of judgment. When I reached for the sugar packets, my ribs ached with the motion. Pain flared through me, but sharper still was the sting of being treated like a pariah in the very place that had once felt like a second home. I stirred the coffee slowly, letting the spoon clang against the ceramic. The sound was louder than the voices that refused to speak to me. From the corner booth, two men I'd once played cards with lowered their voices. One of them looked straight at me, then away so quickly it felt like a slap. My ears caught a single word, hissed under breath, "Stingy." I left money on the table and walked out into the sun, the brightness a mockery of the weight inside me. Passing through the familiar streets of Jacksonville, I noticed how people's eyes shifted. Some offered pitying looks, others outright disdain. The story had already traveled from Daniel's lips to theirs, polished into a tale of betrayal, the selfish father who abandoned his son's future. At the corner, I pulled out the small notebook I had started keeping since the hospital. My hand trembled as I wrote, "Day the community turned its back." The letters scratched across the page, uneven, but firm enough to last. The afternoon brought the harshest cut. I saw a man I once called a friend, Bill, who had shared beers with me after long shifts, who had stood at my side at parades. He caught sight of me on Main Street, his pace faltered, then he turned sharply, crossing to the opposite sidewalk. No wave, no nod, not even the courtesy of acknowledgement. Just rejection, as clear as a slammed door. I stopped walking, the heat bearing down, and let the scene etch itself into my mind. That kind of shame doesn't shout. It whispers. It accumulates. It weighs more than broken ribs. My chest tightened, though not from pain this time. Betrayal from family had bruised my body, but betrayal from the community threatened something deeper. My name, my standing, my dignity. I pressed a hand to my side, felt the rigid bandages beneath, and wondered how much longer I could stand upright under the weight of silence and whispers. And then as I reached my porch, I touched the dog tags that hung, hidden under my shirt. The cool metal steadied me. Their weight was a reminder of battle survived, of endurance carved into bone and memory. I stroked the tags gently and whispered to myself, the battlefield is just beginning. Stabilized, Mr. Coleman, your son owes $47,000 in credit card debt. The voice of the loan officer carried clearly through the receiver, each syllable cutting sharper than a blade. I sat stiffly in my living room, the Florida evening pressing humid against the windows. Papers littered the coffee table, utility bills, old mortgage statements, letters from the VA hospital, all dwarfed by the open laptop that displayed bank portals and debt calculators. The light from the screen washed my face pale, but inside, I felt the warmth of a fire beginning to rise. The woman on the phone introduced herself as Janet, a loan officer at First National. Her tone was cautious, but she didn't withhold the facts. In addition to the $47,000 in revolving credit debt, there are auto loans, student loans. Their current debt-to-income ratio is dangerously high. Any bank looking at this file would call it unmanageable. I wrote quickly in the notebook balanced on my lap. The pen scratched across the paper with the same discipline I had once applied to field reports. $47,000 credit cards, car loans, student loans, each note underlined twice. Miss Hoffman, I said slowly, what ratio are we talking about exactly? As a pause, his paper shuffled on her end. 70%, nearly 3/4 of their gross income is already committed before adding another mortgage. I pressed the words into my notebook in heavy ink. Debt-to-income ratio, 70%, cannot qualify legally. The letters were large, urgent, almost carved into the page. My ribs still ached as I leaned forward, but this time the pain felt purposeful, a reminder of why I could not give in. They hadn't just struck me physically. They had built a house of cards and tried to force me beneath it. Thank you for your honesty, I said, closing my eyes as the numbers burned themselves into memory. This information helps more than you know. Submarines hesitated, then added gently, Mr. Coleman, I can't offer advice, but please be careful. People who dig themselves this deep often lash out when the truth is exposed. For a long while, listening to the low hum of the air conditioner, staring at the mountain of papers. Each sheet now looked different. Not clutter, not burden, but weapons. For years, I had thought my strength lived in my fists, in the training of my body. But here, in my 62nd year, I discovered my true weapon was memory, order, record. I spread the papers across the table, arranging them in careful rows. Debts, receipts, screenshots I had printed from Daniel and Lissa's social media, lavish trips, designer handbags, steak dinners, captioned with fake laments about struggling. Each page I touched, I marked in the journal, cross-referencing dates. My handwriting was rough but deliberate. A Marines after-action report, written for a war no one else could see. The old pain of betrayal still throbbed in me, but beneath it ran a colder current. Determination. If they wanted to drag me into a courtroom, then I would arrive not as a victim, but as a man carrying evidence like armor. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked heavily. Outside, cicadas shrilled. I took a red marker and circled the page where the numbers stared back. 70%. I whispered the words aloud. Not just irresponsible, impossible. That night, the house was quiet, except for the scratching of my pen and the hum of the laptop. My body was sore, but my mind was alive, sharper than it had felt in years. And then the phone rang. I let it buzz once, twice, before switching to voicemail. Daniel's voice came through, ragged and broken, broadcast on speaker as I sat with pen poised above paper. Dad, don't betray us. Richard, this is Janelle Brooks. Do you remember me helping you with your will? Her voice was calm, professional, and carried the quiet confidence of someone used to straightening out chaos. I sat across from her in a modest office, the blinds tilted against the Jacksonville sun, dust motes drifting in the air. The walls were lined with framed degrees and certificates, their edges yellowed slightly with time. A faint smell of old paper and ink hung around us, comforting in its permanence. I laid a folder on her desk, my hands deliberate despite the stiffness in my ribs. Inside, the hospital report, photographs of the bruises, my notebook filled with dates, transcripts of calls, and the red-circled debt figures. Her eyes moved swiftly over each page, the flick of her pen making small notes in the margins. This isn't just family pressure, she said, her voice firm. This is elder abuse. And given the debt patterns, it's fraud. They're constructing a story to force your compliance. You've done the right thing documenting everything. Lowly, the weight of her words anchoring what I already knew but had feared to claim. Elder abuse. Fraud. To hear them from a lawyer's mouth turned my private nightmare into a defined battlefield. She leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. Daniel and Alyssa will try to undermine you. Expect claims that you're confused, that you've made promises you don't remember. They'll paint you as forgetful, perhaps even unfit. It's a standard tactic when money is involved. The words landed hard, but they didn't surprise me. For weeks I had felt the ground shift under my feet. Family ties twisted into ropes meant to bind me. Now I saw the plan more clearly, not just to bleed me dry, but to erase my credibility entirely. I tapped the edge of the notebook. Then I'll fight them on their ground. Her eyes sharpened with approval. Good. Evidence and discipline, those are your allies now, and you have both. She reached into a desk drawer and pulled out a small black device, setting it gently between us. You will use this to protect your dignity. The recorder's metallic click when she slid it open was louder than expected in the quiet office. My gaze dropped to it, and for a moment I saw the reflection of my dog tag swinging against my chest the night Daniel shoved me. Discipline, proof, order. It had saved me before. It would save me again. Every conversation, every voicemail, every threat, Janelle instructed. Capture it all. Memory is powerful, Richard, but recordings are indisputable, echoed my own silent creed. What is written, what is preserved, cannot be denied. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt less alone. Here was someone who did not look at me as a miser or a burden. She saw me as a man under siege who still had the spine to stand tall. That evening, back in my living room, I placed the recorder on the coffee table beside my dog tags. My phone buzzed, Daniel's name flashing across the screen. I let it roll to voicemail, then pressed play. His voice, trembling with anger, filled the room. Pay, or next time it'll be worse. This time, it was captured in perfect clarity. Richard replayed the threatening voicemail, this time recorded as evidence. Dad, I didn't mean it. But you've got all that money just sitting there. Daniel's voice quivered through the receiver, the fragile tone of a man trying to claw back ground he'd already lost. I sat alone in the living room, the night pressing in around me. The only light came from the lamp on my desk, its glow spilling across the open notebook where I had scribbled down times, dates, names. The small recorder Janelle had given me lay beside the phone, a red light winking steadily. My ribs still ached when I leaned forward, but the pain grounded me. Didn't mean what, Daniel? I asked, keeping my voice flat. There was a pause, the sound of his uneven breathing filling the silence. When I said you owed us, that came out wrong. He swallowed hard, words tumbling over each other. What I meant was, family helps family. You know? You've got all that money just sitting there, and we're your only family. Who else would you leave it to? Charity? Frustrations landed with a dull thud. Charity, exactly the slip I had been waiting for. My hand hovered near the notebook, but I forced myself to keep still. Let the recording capture every syllable. Your inheritance, I said slowly, each word measured. Daniel, I'm still alive. From the background came Alyssa's sharp voice, dripping with scorn. Don't let him trick you. I stretched, knowing it made Daniel nervous. He hated silence, hated the void where manipulation usually rushed in. Finally, his voice broke through again, sharper now, almost desperate. We never thought you'd fight us, Dad. Our lawyer said most old men just settle. It's easier that way. Less embarrassing for everyone. Semantics had slipped. His entitlement spilled into the open, caught by the tiny device humming on the desk. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I just let the weight of his confession hang between us, heavy and damning. Daniel, I said at last, you should be careful about what you admit. The line crackled. Alexa muttered something muffled, then the call ended abruptly. The silence that followed was almost peaceful. I sat back slowly, letting the ache in my ribs settle into something more bearable. The battlefield was shifting. For the first time, they weren't pushing me into corners. I was pulling them out into the open. I reached for the recorder, pressed stop, and labeled the file with deliberate precision. Evidence number 5, motive inheritance. The phone lit up on the patio table, the glow cutting through the thick Florida night. The message read, I'm pregnant. Do this for your grandchild, Alyssa. And I just stared at the words. Crickets rasped in the yard, the salt air carrying the faint hum of the distant highway. My ribs still pulled tight with each breath, but it was my chest, my heart, that felt the sharper blow. They knew where to strike. Not with fists this time, but with the weapon of imagined innocence. A child. I called Daniel immediately, my thumb pressing down so hard the screen almost cracked. He answered after 3 rings, his voice unsteady. Dad? Daniel, I cut in, steady but cold. Is Alyssa pregnant? There was silence, then the sound of him fumbling for words. It's complicated. Complicated? I pressed. Either she is or she isn't. Which is it? On the other end, I heard Alyssa's voice, muffled but urgent. Don't let him push you. Stick to the story. The call ended abruptly. I sat back in my chair, letting the night sounds wash over me. I reached for my notebook, flipped to a clean page and wrote down the date, the time, the exact words. Pregnancy claim. No confirmation. My pen pressed so deep it nearly tore the paper. 2 days later, the follow-up came as casually as a weather report. Another message buzzed across my phone. This time Alyssa's tone was dismissive, almost mocking. False alarm. Stress makes me late sometimes. I underlined the phrase in red. Pregnancy, false alarm, manipulation. The cruelty of it burned deeper than any bruise. They had tried to bind me with the idea of a grandchild, a life not yet conceived, wielded like a ransom note. My stomach turned at the thought, not from weakness, but from the realization that there were no limits left for them, no boundary they wouldn't cross. I set the notebook aside, staring out into the dark yard. The cicadas droned louder, as if echoing the hollow throb in my chest. I thought of Daniel as a boy, running through this same yard chasing fireflies, laughing, free. How had that boy grown into a man who let this kind of cruelty into his house, his marriage, his very mouth? The scrape of shoes on gravel pulled me back. A knock sounded at the back door, brisk, impatient. I rose slowly, stiffly, and opened it to find Mrs. Green from next door. Her face was pale, her eyes darting with discomfort. She held out a sheet of paper, freshly printed, the ink still faintly smelling of toner. I thought you should see this, Richard, she said softly. I took it from her hands. The headline hit me like another blow. It was a screenshot from Facebook. Alyssa's post broadcast to everyone in town. Selfish father refuses to help pregnant couple. The glow of a phone screen showed me a new headline spreading like wildfire. Elderly millionaire refuses to help struggling family. Underneath was a photograph of Daniel, his face streaked with tears, his shoulders slumped in a performance of despair. The post had racked up hundreds of comments within hours. Friends, cousins, old neighbors. People I had known for decades lined up to weigh in. Shameful, one wrote. Family should always come first. Another, money won't keep you warm when you're old and alone. I read each line with a calm face, but a tightening jaw. Every insult, every judgment, every half-truth Alyssa had engineered, I saved. Screenshots stacked neatly into folders on my computer, each one labeled and time-stamped. Evidence of how they weaponized community against me. That Sunday, I attended service at the Baptist church I'd gone to for nearly 30 years. The sanctuary's cool air smelled faintly of hymnals and lemon polish, but instead of the usual warmth, I felt eyes on me, sharp, assessing, suspicious. I sat alone in a pew near the back, my dog tags cold against my chest, the steady weight reminding me who I still was beneath their lies. After the sermon, as the congregation spilled into the courtyard, whispers rippled like dry leaves in the wind. "Did you see the post?" one voice hissed. I heard he cut them off completely. Father Miller approached, his smile forced but polite. "Richard," he said carefully, "I've been hearing troubling stories. People are saying you've turned your back on Daniel when he needed you most." His eyes searched mine for denial, for an explanation. I nodded slowly.
People are saying many things, Father. Not all of them are true.
He hesitated, then gave my arm a squeeze. "The truth has a way of surfacing. Hold fast," declared his restraint. Outside, an old friend, Margaret, shook her head as she passed me.
"Richard, I didn't think you were that kind of man."
She muttered, her disappointment heavy. The words struck harder than Daniel's fists ever had. To be doubted, not for my actions, but for their fiction. That was the real cruelty. I walked home in silence, the buzz of gossip following me like gnats. In my study, I opened the notebook, the lamp casting long shadows across the pages filled with my cramped handwriting. I picked up the red pen, drew a circle around the words I wrote with steady precision. Weaponizing community, evidence number 12. The envelope was heavy, the paper thick, the seal a glaring red across its face. Summons, Duval County Court. I held it for a long moment at the kitchen table, the cicadas droning outside in the Florida heat. The weight in my hands wasn't just paper, it was betrayal made official, inked into the machinery of law. When I finally slid it open with my pocket knife, the words seemed to blur for a second. Complaint for damages, $497,000 plus fees. I read each page slowly, carefully, the way I used to study field manuals in the Marines. Allegations of oral contract, claims that I had promised to fund their house, accusations that my sudden refusal proved cognitive decline. They weren't just trying to strip my savings, they were trying to paint me senile, unfit, an old man who couldn't remember his own promises. I called Janelle immediately. Within the hour, I was in her small office, the blinds drawn against the glare of late morning sun. She flipped through the packet with a lawyer's detachment, though her lips pressed tight with every page. "Richard," she said finally, "they're coming hard. They're alleging an oral contract, promissory estoppel, even elder confusion. They'll try to argue you can't keep your story straight." She set the papers down and looked me in the eye. "Their lawyer is betting you'll fold. Most people your age would." I sat back in the chair, the leather creaking beneath me, my dog tags cool against my chest. "Then most people my age never served." "I don't fold." Played Janelle's expression softened. "Then we fight. But it will be ugly. Discovery, depositions, witnesses twisting your words." "Punished," I said. "I've lived through worse. I won't compromise my dignity just to make them quiet." She nodded slowly, then slid a fresh set of documents across the desk. "Your counterclaims, elder abuse, defamation, harassment. If you sign these, you're not just defending, you're going on the offensive." I picked up the pen. For a moment, I thought of Daniel as a boy in the backyard, chasing fireflies, his laughter echoing against the summer dusk. Then I remembered his hand shoving me into a chair, the cold look in Alyssa's eyes as she hissed, "Next time worse." That boy was gone. In his place stood an adversary who had chosen the battlefield. The pen scratched across the paper as I signed, not shaky, not rushed, steady the way I used to sign after-action reports. My hand was firm, Marine steady. Peacefully, Janelle gathered the files. We'll file immediately, and Richard, whatever happens, you've already taken the hardest step. You've refused to be cornered. Ragus my back straight despite the dull ache in my ribs. The law might be their weapon, but discipline and truth were mine. As I stepped out into the blinding sunlight, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I answered without hesitation. Daniel's voice slithered through the line, low and venomous. "See you in court, Dad." Sarah, the waitress at Murphy's Diner, froze mid-step, her eyes wide. Wait, Daniel was in Vegas the week he said he couldn't buy food? Her voice carried across the quiet diner, drawing the attention of two customers in the next booth. I nodded, sliding the printed screenshots across the counter. One showed Daniel with a cocktail in hand, the bright lights of the Strip behind him. Another was Alyssa, posing by a pool in designer sunglasses. The timestamp at the bottom read the same week they had plastered Facebook with pleas about barely affording groceries. Sarah's face hardened. She placed the photos back on the counter carefully, like they were toxic. We all felt sorry for them. I even slipped Daniel a free meal once when he came in looking pitiful. But this... She shook her head. We were played. I left the diner quietly, but by afternoon the murmurs were moving through town like a new current. At Tom's hardware store, I unfolded another sheet from my folder, a copy of their overdue rent notice. 2 months behind, I told him, and the same week they bought a brand new gaming setup. Tom scratched his beard, eyes narrowing. So that's why he came asking me for a short-term loan. Said you were being cruel, holding back money that should have been his. Guess he didn't mention the $1,000 graphics card. He tossed the paper back onto the counter, his tone clipped. People around here don't like liars, Richard. They like even less being made fools of. Sunday brought the most telling moment. After the service, I lingered in the courtyard, the folder tucked under my arm. Father Miller approached, his expression guarded. Before he could speak, I handed him a timeline I'd assembled. Photos, receipts, credit card records, all lined up in neat order. Unresolved. It slowly. When he looked up, his face carried disappointment. Not at me, but at them. They painted you as cold, but this is deliberate deceit. He folded the paper carefully, slipping it into his Bible. The truth will spread, Richard. I'll make sure of it. And it did. By midweek, the same neighbors who had crossed the street to avoid me were now stopping at my mailbox to ask quiet questions. Did they really spend $8,000 in Vegas? I thought Alyssa said the medical bills were crushing them. I gave no speeches, no accusations, just let the evidence speak. Each whisper, each shaken head was another stone pulled from the wall Daniel and Alyssa had built against me. The diner confirmed the shift most clearly. Sarah slid a steaming mug across the counter, her voice soft. I'm sorry, Mr. Coleman. People were wrong. She set the bill aside, her hand resting briefly on mine. Coffee's on the house. That night, back home in the stillness of my study, my phone buzzed. A message lit the screen. It was Ethan, my cousin, the same man who had once jabbed a finger into my chest, demanding I share. His words were clipped, almost panicked. Rut Ludi, Chura ki chung toi kung bilo. I had once taught Daniel how to balance on 2 wheels creaked beneath us. Back then, his legs had been too short to touch the ground, his laughter rising each time I caught him before he toppled. Now, decades later, father and son sat across from one another in Riverside Park, the silence stretching longer than the river in front of us. The evening sun painted the water in gold. A soft breeze stirred the branches overhead, but Daniel's face was gray, drawn, almost haggard. He rubbed his palms together, avoiding my eyes like a boy caught lying about something broken. Finally, he spoke, his voice rasping. Dad, if you just give me $30,000, we can drop the lawsuit. No more court, no more drama, just help us this once. I didn't answer. Instead, I tapped the small recorder in my pocket, ensuring the red light glowed. Daniel slumped forward, elbows on his knees. We're drowning, Dad. The credit card's $47,000. The BMW's 3 months behind. The lawyer fees, they're bleeding us dry. He dragged a hand through his hair, trembling. Kayla keeps saying we'll get through it, but she doesn't see it. We're sinking. My chest ached, not from my ribs this time, but from something deeper. I remembered the boy on that same bench, grinning, begging me to push harder, faster. Now here he was, hollow-eyed, begging again, but this time for money. not balance. You lied to me, Daniel, I said evenly. You lied to the court, to the town, to yourself. And now you want me to buy you out of the hole you dug. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. We thought you'd fold. Most old men do. The words struck like a slap. Not apology, not love, just expectation that age meant weakness. My Marine discipline held me steady. I clicked the recorder off, sliding it back into my pocket. The river flowed silent beside us. For a moment, I almost wished I could reach out and pull him from the current of his own making. Almost. I stood, the sun casting my shadow long across the grass. Without a word, I walked away. His figure crumpled on the bench behind me. I saved the file under a single word. Confession. The Duval County Courthouse loomed above me, its stone steps radiating heat in the Florida sun. At the gates, cameras glinted like watchful eyes. Reporters lingered, pens ready, murmuring into recorders. And then, Daniel and Alyssa descended from a sleek black sedan, their clothes immaculate, a tailored suit on him, a black designer dress on her. They looked less like litigants and more like actors walking onto a stage. Inside, the air shifted. The high ceiling, the polished wood, the solemn flag behind Judge Henley's bench, all lent weight to the moment. I felt the familiar discipline settle over me, the stillness before combat. Brennan, their attorney, rose with practiced poise. Your Honor, my clients stand before you devastated. Promises were made, verbal assurances repeated at family gatherings. Mr. Coleman told them he would help them secure a home. That is why they acted in good faith. Daniel took the stand, hands trembling just enough to seem rehearsed. Dad always said family takes care of family. At Christmas, at birthdays, he promised us support. That's why we searched for houses. That's why we believed we had a future. Followed dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. He told us we could count on him. He encouraged us. And then he abandoned us. We've been humiliated, left with nothing but debts. He promised to help us. Her sobs filled the chamber, carefully measured, a metronome of pity. From my seat, I kept still, let them build their fiction. Then Janelle rose, sharp and steady. Your Honor, the defense asked that the court look at facts, not theatrics. She laid out photographs, receipts, printouts. Mr. Coleman has documented every interaction. Injuries sustained from physical assault, medical records proving elder abuse, a timeline of financial manipulation, and most importantly, recordings. She clicked play. My own voice came first, calm. With what money? You can barely afford your current rent. Then Daniel's reply, jagged and unmistakable. We never thought you'd fight. Our lawyer said most old men just settle. The courtroom froze. Alyssa's tears stalled. Daniel's eyes darted, searching for escape. Even Brennan stiffened, his mask cracking for a second. The silence stretched long, heavy as iron chains. The truth had its own gravity, pulling the performance apart piece by piece. Judge Henley leaned forward, her gavel in hand. The sound when it struck wood snapped the air. Mr. Coleman, she said evenly, eyes fixed on me. One question. Mr. Coleman, did you ever sign an agreement to pay this mortgage? The judge's words rang through the hushed courtroom. My hands rested on the oak rail, steady despite the storm inside. I lifted my eyes to meet hers unflinching. No, Your Honor. The sound seemed to echo, cutting through every carefully rehearsed lie that Daniel and Alyssa had spun. Across the aisle, Brennan froze mid-gesture. His notes, neatly stacked, might as well have burst into flames. His mouth open, then shut again, as though the oxygen had been pulled from his lungs. For a heartbeat, the room was still. Reporters leaned forward, pens hovering. Friends and neighbors who had come to gawk at the scandal stiffened, their faces shifting from skepticism to dawning comprehension. The performance collapsed. Judge Henley tapped her gavel once, firm but controlled. Case dismissed, counterclaims granted. The words dropped like iron into the silence. Daniel sat rigid, color draining from his face, as though someone had pulled the floor out beneath him. Alyssa's eyes went wide, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The sobs that had seemed endless just moments ago vanished into a stunned silence. Janelle touched my elbow lightly, a signal of triumph, but I barely moved. The Marine in me had learned long ago that victory isn't about celebration. It's about survival, about holding your ground when the world tries to push you over. The judge's voice grew sharper, her eyes scanning the plaintiffs. This court does not tolerate frivolous suits, nor will it allow family members to exploit and abuse the elderly for financial gain. She let the words sink in, turning toward Brennan. Counselor, your case has not only failed, but has revealed a disturbing pattern of manipulation. Brennan attempted to object, his voice catching in his throat. Your Honor, if I may. You may not. She cut him off. Another crack of the gavel silenced him completely. Daniel's hands fumbled in his lap, knuckles white. I recognized the look, panic, stripped of bravado. Alyssa stared straight ahead, blinking as though she could will herself out of the room. My chest rose and fell slowly. The years of discipline, the dog tags that had clinked against my ribs in the kitchen weeks ago, had led me here. One answer, one truth, nothing more. The gavel struck again, harder this time. This case will be referred for perjury review. Appeared at my front steps carrying a casserole dish, steam curling beneath the foil lid. Richard, I'm sorry, we were wrong. Demolished was softer than I'd ever heard it, her eyes lowered, as if she'd been carrying a weight for weeks. I accepted the dish, the warmth bleeding into my hands, and felt a different kind of heat rise in my chest, something gentler than anger, closer to relief. The bougainvillea lining the porch was in full bloom, bursts of pink against the white fence. The same neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid me now lingered at the edge of my lawn. Sarah from the diner brought a pie. Tom from the hardware store walked over with his hat in his hands. One by one, they spoke words I hadn't expected to hear. I judged too fast. Turbulence. I should have asked questions instead of listening to rumors. You didn't deserve what they said about you. Small, almost hesitant, but together they built into a chorus that filled the quiet spaces of my yard. I listened, not rushing to forgive, but letting their words settle like seeds in the soil. On Sunday, Father Miller stopped me at the church doors. Richard, we'd like you to speak next week about elder abuse, about how truth holds its ground. His hand was firm on my shoulder, his gaze clear. I nodded slowly. The thought of standing before the congregation, the very people who had once whispered behind my back, didn't frighten me. It felt necessary. Inside the sanctuary, light streamed through the stained glass windows. Children fidgeted in pews. Older men and women nodded as I passed, some whispering blessings. The shame that had clung to me for months was dissipating, burned away by recognition of the truth. Later that afternoon, Sarah came by, the scent of coffee clinging to her clothes. She sat across from me at the porch table, eyes earnest. You showed us what integrity looks like. Prejudice struck deeper than she realized. For weeks, I had been painted as greedy, selfish, cold. Now, standing in the same place where insults had once clung to me, the tide had turned. Integrity. That was the currency I valued most, the inheritance I hoped to leave behind. I stood as dusk approached, casserole empty, voices fading down the street. The garden beckoned. Rows of vegetables needed tending, and the earth smelled rich, alive. I stepped into the yard, the dog tags cool in my palm, their metal edges catching the last rays of sun. Holding them, I thought about discipline, about battles fought not with fists or guns, but with patience and truth. The war inside the courtroom was over. Yet I knew there was still one battle left, one confrontation that could not be avoided. Richard stepped into his garden, hand clutching the dog tags, thinking about the final battle. The cicadas droned in the heavy Florida heat as I knelt in the soil, pressing another row of tomato seedlings into place. The earth was warm, dark, and forgiving beneath my hands, a far cry from the cold marble floors of the courthouse or the sterile walls of the hospital. Each seedling stood straight and fragile, waiting for care, waiting for time. I leaned back on my heels, sweat sliding down my temples, and gazed at the garden I had tended for decades. Rows of peppers, beans, squash, each one a small promise kept. This garden had been my quiet anchor through storms of grief, betrayal, and loneliness. Today it felt more than that. It felt like a testament. As I covered the roots with soil, I remembered fists slamming into me in my own kitchen, the sting in my ribs, the sterile beeping of hospital machines. I remembered the courtroom, Alyssa's tears, Daniel's hollow words, and the silence that followed when truth spoke louder than performance. Through it all, I had refused to break. A neighbor paused at the fence, tipping his cap. "Evening, Richard. Looks like the best garden in Jacksonville." His smile was genuine, not the forced politeness of months past. Behind him, Mrs. Green waved as she passed by with her granddaughter. No whispers, no sideways glances, just warmth. Respect returned in quiet gestures. I brushed dirt from my palms and sat on the edge of the raised bed, looking at the yard bathed in the orange glow of late summer. A slow smile spread across my face. I didn't give in. I murmured to the air, to the soil, to the unseen faces of Marines I once served with. I never surrendered. The dog tags around my neck shifted as I clasped them in my hand, pressing the cool metal to my chest. "Honor," I whispered. "It can't be bought with fists or lawsuits." The words rang steady, each syllable grounding me. My honor had been tested, dragged through mud, and nearly stolen. Yet here it was, intact, stronger. The garden swayed gently in the evening breeze. The sound of cicadas softened. The smell of jasmine drifted in from the edge of the yard, and the last sunlight painted the fence in gold. I thought about legacy, not wealth, not property, but the proof that dignity can endure even when family turns into enemies. Kissing my story would not make headlines beyond this county, but in the eyes of those who once doubted me, I had left something behind. The image of an old man who refused to be broken, who fought with patience and truth instead of anger. That was enough. That was more than enough. The camera pulls back. Richard sits in the glow of the sunset, at peace after the brutal family battle. The storm of betrayal and falsehoods ended not with fists, but with the steady weight of truth. What began as humiliation and violence was silenced in court, where dignity spoke louder than tears and lies. Justice may arrive late, but it resonates like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, unyielding, unforgettable. No wall of deceit can stand forever against the tide of truth. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story.